So I found this super tiny little nut, and that goes on there just like that. So that's going to be raising it up probably like 2 more slots, if there was 2 more slots underneath of where the needle is now. So I think it's going to look good enough to be temporary. This bolt came loose. It's still on there and everything, but it just rattled loose. So I had to limp it home. So it's a beautiful day here, February, southern Minnesota. It's supposed to be winter, but really, look at this. It is so nice out. Perfect day, perfect warm day to be testing a VM22 Mikuni carburetor on the mini bikes. So today we're going to be seeing how much faster top speed and 0 to 30 before and after with this VM22 Mikuni style carburetor on my mini bike. So this is my mini bike. It has a header pipe, an aluminum flywheel. It has a full governor delete, 22-pound valve springs, a hot 265 cam, and a stage 2 stock appearing carburetor. Also a thin head gasket. But the stage 2 carburetor setup with a stage 1 kit, supposedly this is still faster. So I'm going to be testing that out. So VM22 should bolt right on there. So another thing about this mini bike is it has a hot 265 cam, and it is, you know, probably making quite a bit of power, and it's going to be making even more power with this Mikuni carburetor. But it has the stock connecting rod, so a cast aluminum connecting rod. And I'm just going to run that. I don't plan on putting a billet or forged rod in because I don't think it's worth it for the price. So we're going to see if it ever blows up or not. It might, now that we're adding this Mikuni carburetor. Yeah, it has an upgraded flywheel, so that's good. That won't fly apart. Only the connecting rod is what I'm worried about. Let's test the 0 to 30 and top speed with this stock appearing carburetor.
Alright, 0 to 30, first attempt. Second attempt.
So now that I got everything all muddy, it's going to be a pretty easy swap. I think I've put one of these on before, this exact one actually. But it didn't run right. I couldn't get it tuned right. So I took it back off and put the stock carburetor back on, and it was faster. But I have an O2 sensor coming, and we'll be able to find an exhaust. It might not be that exhaust, but something that we can put on here, and then we can put the O2 sensor in. We're going to tune this with an O2 sensor because I'm no good at tuning. I'm no good at guessing if it's rich or lean or how rich or lean. So we should be able to get this thing pretty dialed. Step one is simply remove the air filter. And then being that this has a governor delete, I had to make my own homemade throttle linkage. So it's almost impossible to get out, but it just falls out when you're riding sometimes. Okay, I got it. And now I need to go grab a 10mm and take those two bolts off. And this air filter adapter will slide right off. Okay, now I gotta remove the fuel line. Okay, I plugged the fuel line with a bolt, stuck that in the end. Now this stage 2 carburetor from Go Power Sports will slide right off. Okay, I already loosened these studs with a vice grip. So now take those out. Now, after I loosen the front 2 bolts in this gas tank, it is missing the rear bolt for the gas tank. I'll take that off because we need to put a longer fuel line on there anyway. There's a gasket already on here, stuck on there from last time. And the hardware I'm using is not actually from this kit to bolt this on, so I am not sure. They might be too long. Might have to cut them a little bit shorter. Last step is to remove this throttle plate because we don't need it anymore. Now I can remove the throttle cable from there, and we're done tearing the engine apart. We can start putting it back together. So the VM22 is installed onto the engine. Now I gotta hook the throttle cable up. So I screw this cap off. There's a spring inside there. Gotta get the slide. Put the gasket back in there, that came out. I already have the end on here on my throttle cable for this Mikuni. If you don't have that, you can just solder an end on there. That works too. So I am now gonna look where the clip is on this needle because I've had it for a while. I don't remember where the clip was. It looks like it's on the bottom. So that would make it run richer. I'm just thinking because I got to get this tuned right. Okay, I decided I'll leave the clip at the bottom. When we get the O2 sensor, we'll have to figure out what the deal is, why it won't run right, and then we'll adjust the needle from there. That goes all the way down like that. Boy, my throttle cable might not be long enough. Pay for the expensive Pro Taper stuff and it comes for a dirt bike and it doesn't fit a mini bike. And when I look in the carburetor, I can see that the slide is all the way down. So that's good. That means we'll have idle. So something's stopping us from having full throttle. That's all the further the twist grip opens. So I had this adjusted as far as it'll go, and it still wouldn't lift the slide all the way up. So I inserted a nut down here, and that seems to be working. I have idle and full throttle. So that should be good to go. Now we can install the gas tank and the air filter, and it should be ready to fire up. But I know it's going to be way out of tune because I messed with it without knowing if it was rich or lean a long time ago. All right, so I got everything put back together. I still got to bolt the gas tank down, but that's about it. I know how bad it looks with this gigantic fuel filter on there, but that's what I have. I wanted to put a fuel filter on it. Throw the air filter on, and I'm gonna see if it'll start. So long story short, it won't run right. I can sometimes get it to idle if it's on choke, and I can not take it off choke. Shuts off immediately. And it has such a terrible bog, it won't move at all. So that O2 sensor came, and we're gonna be installing that because we highly need it to tune this carburetor. So here's the O2 sensor. Here's the gauge. This is the actual sensor. Lots of wiring. Don't know if I'm going to be able to figure it out or not. This is what gets a hole drilled in the exhaust pipe, and that fits in there and welds onto there. Then the oxygen sensor screws into there. Yeah, lots of wiring. Then I have to make a mount for this gauge. Somehow I have to hook up a battery into this system. See, it says fuel pump relay. Well, I don't got a fuel pump. It says ECU. I don't got an ECU. It's just a regular mini bike. It doesn't have any of this stuff. And all I want is this air fuel stuff. I don't need no boost or tachometer or oil water temperature, oil pressure, voltmeter, exhaust gas temp. I just want air fuel ratio. So this is the O2 sensor bung. This is what gets welded into the exhaust pipe. And that is where I want it to be, I think. So then it's putting up and the moisture can come out of the sensor when it starts. So I have to drill a hole in the pipe and weld that on there. Now, I do have a TIG welder, but I don't know how to use it, so it's just gonna be MIG welded. I think it should work fine though. It is stainless steel. It'll be my first time welding stainless steel. But this is just regular exhaust pipe. Yeah, it's really thick metal that I have to drill through because I'm drilling through this layer of metal and this layer of metal. And this pipe fit inside this pipe. And when I made this whole exhaust pipe, I just left this one long so it goes out to probably here. And I'm drilling here. So I have to go through 2 layers of exhaust pipe metal, and this one is way thicker than this because this is pipe metal. It was threaded on the end and everything. This is just regular exhaust pipe. So I did not drill it all the way down, as you can see. So now if we take this bung, it doesn't drop all the way in there, which is what I want. I want to try and keep that the end of the sensor as close to the middle of the pipe as I can. Otherwise it'd be too far down into the pipe. So this just spaces it out a little bit. So now I think I can weld that in there. So this is what the exhaust looks like back on the bike. Now this O2 sensor screws right into there. So since I have an O2 sensor, I need some source of power. So I made a battery mount, and here is a little 12 volt battery, 7 amps hour. Yeah, so this little battery just fits right in there, and that's pretty solid. The battery could fall out, but of course the battery box is about as solid as it can get. Hosed clamp to the frame on both sides. So I think that's gonna work really good. Find a bungee strap or something to hold the battery in. And then I gotta figure out wiring. Okay, then I made this to hold the gauge. It's not the prettiest ever, but it'll work, and that's gonna get bolted right there. Right on the handlebars like that. So I think it's gonna look good enough to be temporary, but I didn't want to put less effort into it because it might be on here for a little while, because I might actually be tuning multiple carburetors on this engine so that they're decently tuned for other engines, because I can't guess if the carburetor is lean or rich. I'm bad at that. So this will help me, and if I'm having trouble tuning a carburetor on something else, I can just swap it onto here, and I have an air-fuel ratio gauge to tune it with. So I'll get this installed, and then I have to work on the scariest part, the wiring. So far I've just done cutting and welding. Well, now I have to do wiring. Good morning. Yesterday I got the gauge mounted on the mini bike. I'll show you that pretty quick here. But I found a diagram, wiring diagram for this online, so really thankful for that. Hopefully it works. Now we just got to work on wiring. That's what the gauge looks like. Mounted right there. Doesn't look too shabby. Holding the phone at eye level, sitting on the seat right where I would be. That's how it looks, so you can easily see it. Now the wiring isn't too complicated on this, but of course I ain't good at wiring at all. So we're gonna see if I can do it. So after probably only 30 minutes of wiring, it didn't take very long. I have it all wired up. It does not look good, but it's wired up nonetheless. Like I said, this is probably temporary. So this is a switch. That's an old light switch for this mini bike. So if I turn that on, and then it tells me the voltage for a little bit. And after a while, it'll switch to the air-fuel ratio. So I put a bigger jet in it than what it had earlier when it was running bad. Yeah, I went up from a 115 to a 130 main jet. Hopefully that fixes it a little bit, and then we're gonna see once what this thing says. All right, see once if I can start it up. So at idle with the choke on, I believe choke with the lever up is on. I could be wrong with that actually. But with the choke up, which I believe is on, it idles at about 11.5, 12. So I think that's pretty good. It could be a little bit leaner, closer to 13 or 14. But if I turn the choke off, it dies immediately. If I push the choke lever down, then it dies immediately. It still has a pretty terrible bog, but this thing, it was only $30, so it's really cheap. And it's not really quick enough. Right at the bog, it doesn't really tell me what's happening if it's rich or lean. It just eventually gets over the bog and then it reads what that's reading. So it's really only a little bit lean yet. And after running it for a while, it gets richer and richer. So that's it warming up. But it doesn't ever get rid of the bog. So I might have to just keep driving this thing a little bit, see once if I can play with it and figure out what the tuning needs to be. If you guys are wondering how I wired it up, if you guys want to do it yourselves, right here is the wiring diagram. It printed out bad. This is actually a green, and then this red goes to the gauge. Here's your battery. I did not do a fuse, I just put a switch in here. Black, gray, and then there's 2 white in the middle. So right here is the slide with the needle. And this needle, the clip on the needle is all the way down, which makes it as rich as it can get, but it's still too lean. So I came up with the crazy idea of putting multiple washers underneath this to try and raise it up a little bit, richening it out at that exact spot where it gets lean, which is quarter throttle to half, 2/3 throttle. That's what this needle controls. Once it gets up to the 3/4 and wide open, then it runs just fine, according to the air fuel gauge. So I think I might put some washers underneath this to lift the needle up even more, richening it up. It's kind of a crazy idea, probably something bad, shouldn't be doing it, but I gotta try something. This carburetor is not working at all. So I found this super tiny little nut, and that goes on there just like that. So that's going to be raising it up probably like 2 more slots, if there was 2 more slots underneath of where the needle is now, or the, not the needle, the clip, sorry. If there's 2 more clip slots under where it is now, that's about where I'm having it. So maybe it'll be too much, I don't know, then I'll just move the clip up one and keep the nut on there. But I'm going to try this, put this in there, see if it runs any better. Oh, and don't be afraid to roast me in the comments if you want. It's not right to do this, but this cheap Amazon VM22 is just not running right for me. And this is the solution I've come up with. It runs fantastic now. There's no bog whatsoever. And when I'm wide open, it gets down to like a 10-to-1 ratio, so it's a little bit rich, but that's only wide open. Otherwise, it's dialed everywhere else. So let's go test 0 to 30 at top speed with the VM22 carburetor. So I didn't even get done testing, and this bolt came loose. It's still on there and everything, but it just rattled loose. So I had to limp it home. I had to hold the carburetor like this and push it in so it didn't have too much of a vacuum leak. So I'll have to tighten that up. And I just realized something. I'm still driving it with choke fully on. I think anyway, with choke up. So maybe I should get that, put a bigger pilot jet in there so it can idle without choke, and then it can run without choke. I already know that. It just can't idle without choke. So I'll probably put a bigger pilot jet in there, and then we can go test 0 to 30 and top speed.
All right, top speed run with the VM22 Carb.
So the speed results for the VM22 are back. I have them written on my whiteboard, so I'll show them to you real quick. They're not the results I was looking for. As you can see, my app that was really glitching out was not doing very good at all. Said I got a slower 0 to 30 than stock. But yeah, it's completely different day. It's the next week that I'm testing. Like it's almost half a week from here to here. So the weather conditions have changed. My app is really acting up. But it did gain almost 2 miles an hour top speed. I expected that. I expected at least that because the VM22 is just a bigger carburetor, more flow at higher RPMs. It is possible that I still don't have the VM22 tuned very good, so that can make it slow. There's a number of things, but when I'm just driving it around the yard, blipping the throttle and just having fun, it feels like it has way more power, way more quickness. So maybe the wind's just messing it up. That could be too. It's really windy out. If you guys know any apps or devices that measure 0 to 30, quarter mile times, or 0 to 20 or anything like that, if it's relatively accurate, you should tell me about it, because this app on my phone is not doing very good. I did have a lot of fun tuning with this air-fuel ratio today. Not a lot of fun with the carburetor. That was just a big nightmare. But I got it tuned pretty decent, I feel. Feels like it has a lot of power with that carburetor. See you next time on Southern Minnesota TV. Thanks for watching, and God bless.